My son looked at my phone, then at me and said, "You don't need internet at your age, Dad." Then he changed the Wi-Fi password right in front of me, in my own house. That was the moment I knew the temporary stay was permanent. He and his family had moved in 6 months ago, and I was being erased, one small privilege at a time. I'm 62. I worked for 38 years as a machinist. I raised my boy James in this house after his mother left. When he asked if his young family could stay here just for a few months while they got back on their feet, I said yes without hesitation. That was my first mistake. What began as a generous offer twisted into a quiet campaign to make me a guest in my own home, and it all led to a single, silent visit to my attorney's office. The first month was fine, chaotic with a toddler running around, but fine. I liked having my grandson Noah underfoot. Then Chloe, James's wife, started making comments. She'd say the living room furniture was a bit dated for Noah to play around. She mentioned how my spare room, my workshop, would make a perfect playroom. I shrugged it off. New parents are anxious. They want everything perfect. But the suggestions became directives. One Tuesday, I came home from my weekly coffee with the guys to find my recliner, the one I've had for 20 years, moved into the corner. A new gray sectional was where it used to be. James was assembling it. "Dad, Chloe found it on Marketplace. It's way more comfortable for movie nights," he said, not meeting my eyes. I didn't say anything. I just went to the garage, my garage, or it was, until the following weekend. That Saturday, I went out to work on an old clock I was restoring. My toolbox was gone. The workbench was cleared. In its place were plastic bins of toys and a small indoor slide. James found me standing there. "We needed to know-proof the space, Dad. All those tools were a hazard." I asked where my things were. He pointed to a single cardboard box in the corner. My precision tools, my projects, my 40 years of accumulation, shoved into a single box. "It's temporary," he said. The word was starting to sound like a threat. The kitchen was next. Chloe implemented a meal schedule. My occasional frying of a steak was deemed too smoky. My coffee maker, the one I used at 5 a.m., was too loud. I was given a small countertop kettle and told the family kitchen was busy from 6 to 8 p.m. I started eating later, alone, after they'd finished. The money talk started subtly. James mentioned how tight things were with daycare costs. Chloe lamented the price of groceries. A week later, James asked if I could chip in a bit more for utilities since there were more of us. I was already paying the mortgage, the taxes, the insurance, but I agreed to $300 a month. It felt like paying rent in my own home. Then came the room reassignment. My office, where I paid bills and kept my files, became the guest room for Chloe's sister, who visited for a week. My things were moved to a closet. When I brought it up, Chloe's tone was final. "Frank, we just need to optimize the space. You're hardly in there." I was hardly in there because I was being squeezed out of every other room. The final nudge out of my own routines was the television. The remote would go missing. Then the streaming service passwords were changed. When I asked, James would sigh and say, "The kids were watching too much, Dad. We're setting boundaries." Boundaries for everyone, it seemed, except for them. I began to feel like a ghost. I'd walk into a room and a conversation would stop. Plans for the weekend would be made without any thought to whether I was there. My mail was sometimes opened by mistake. My laundry was moved out of the washer if I didn't get to it fast enough. Each thing was small, explainable. Together, they formed a clear message. This is not your house anymore. You are in the way. I am a machinist by trade. My whole life, I worked to tolerances of thousandths of an inch. I understand pressure, and I understand when pressure is applied precisely to achieve a specific result. This was a precise operation. A gradual, incremental application of pressure meant to shift me from owner to occupant, from father to boarder. The turning point, the moment the tolerance was broken, was a Thursday evening. I was trying to video call my sister. The connection kept failing. I checked the router. The little stick on the bottom had a new handwritten password I didn't recognize. I went to find James. He was in the living room scrolling on his phone while Noah played. I held up the router. "The internet's out. Do you know the new password?" He didn't look up. "Yeah, I changed it. The old one was on the sticker, not secure." "I need it," I said. Now he looked at me. He put his phone down. "What do you need it for, Dad? You check your email once a day. You watch the news at 7. You don't stream. You don't game." He paused, and his voice took on that tone of exasperated explanation he used with Noah. You don't really need internet at your age. You don't need internet at your age. He said it so plainly, so utterly convinced of its truth. It wasn't about security. It was about permission. It was about relevance. In that moment, I saw the endgame. If I didn't need the internet, did I need a home office, a workshop, a voice in what happened in this house? The next logical step was a quiet suggestion about a nice, manageable senior apartment. I was being retired from my own life. I didn't argue, I just nodded and went back to my bedroom. I sat on the edge of the bed in the dark. I listened to them laughing in the living room, a family unit, complete and self-contained. The house I bought with overtime and sweat, the walls I painted, the floorboards I fixed, it was all becoming their setting, and I was the leftover prop. That night I didn't sleep. I lay awake and did the math of my own existence in that house. I thought about the fact that James's name wasn't on the deed. I thought about the fact that I had no lease with them. I thought about the $300 a month I was now paying. In the eyes of the law, what was I? What were they? And then I thought about the one thing they hadn't touched, couldn't touch. The title, the foundation under all of this. The one piece of paper that defined who this house belonged to. It was in my safe deposit box downtown. As the sun came up, I knew what I had to do. I got dressed, went to the garage, and pulled that single box of my tools from the corner. Buried under my socket wrenches was a business card I'd gotten years before from a client. It was for an attorney named Martin Griego. His practice was listed as estate and property law. I picked up my phone. I had a call to make. Martin Griego's office was in a quiet brick building 2 towns over. He was a compact man in his 50s with a calm, deliberate way of speaking that immediately put me at ease. I laid it out for him. My son, his family, the gradual takeover, the Wi-Fi password. I showed him the bank transfers for the $300. I told him I felt like a prisoner in my own home. He listened, took notes, and then asked one pivotal question. Frank, what is your goal? Do you want them out, or do you want to re-establish boundaries while they stay? I didn't hesitate. I want my house back. I want my life back. He nodded. Then we have 2 issues. First, establishing your absolute legal right to ask them to leave. Second, doing it in a way that protects your asset from any counterclaims or familial pressure. He leaned forward. The fact that you've accepted regular payments, even small ones, complicates things. In many states, that can establish a month-to-month tenancy, giving them tenant rights. They could claim you're their landlord. My stomach dropped. My attempt to help had legally weakened my position. But Martin continued, holding up a finger. There is a powerful, and in your case perfect, tool, a revocable living trust. He explained it simply. I would create a trust with myself as the trustee and the initial beneficiary. I would then transfer the deed of my house into the name of that trust. Legally, the house would no longer belong to Frank, the individual. It would belong to the Frank Living Trust. I would still control it completely. I could live in it, sell it, rent it out. But on paper, the owner had changed. The beauty of this, Martin said, is that it resets the board. You are no longer the individual landlord who accepted rent from your son. You are the trustee of a legal entity tasked with managing its asset for the benefit of the named beneficiary, which is currently you. Your son has no agreement with the trust. His payments were to you personally, not to the trust. It creates a clean, legal separation. He then walked me through the second step. Once the transfer was recorded, the trust, through me as trustee, would serve James with a 30-day notice to vacate. It would be a formal, legal eviction notice, citing the termination of a month-to-month tenancy. Because the landlord was now a trust, familial guilt trips had nowhere to land. It was a business decision by a legal entity. It's cold, I said. It's clear, Martin corrected gently. Clarity in these situations is kindness. It removes the argument. The trust isn't angry. The trust isn't being mean. The trust is simply managing its property. Your son can be mad at a piece of paper all he wants. I signed the engagement letter that day. The process took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of me playing the quiet, cooperative dad while Martin's team prepared the trust documents and filed them with the county recorder. I paid the mortgage from a different account, as Martin advised, to further separate the streams. I stopped accepting the $300, telling James to save it for their own place. He seemed surprised but pleased. He thought he'd won. The day the recorded deed came back to Martin's office, showing the property was now held by the Frank M. Ellis Revocable Living Trust, he called me. "Phase 1 is complete, Frank. You are now a trustee. The next document is the notice. Are you ready?" I took a deep breath. Yes. "Where would you like to serve it? We can have a process server do it, or you can hand it to him directly. Direct service can be impactful." I knew what I had to do. "I'll do it at home." Martin advised me to have a witness, not a family member, present if possible. To be calm, to simply hand him the paper, to say nothing accusatory, to state the facts. The trust was terminating his tenancy. He had 30 days to vacate, and further questions should be directed to the trust's attorney. Then to walk away. I asked my oldest friend, Leo, to come over that next Sunday for dinner. Leo knew the whole story. He'd been telling me for months to kick them out. He agreed to be there. The day felt endless. I made a pot roast, a recipe Carol always used for family dinners. The house smelled of it all afternoon. Chloe was unusually pleasant, complimenting the smell. James played with Noah in the living room. The normalcy of it was the hardest part. It felt like I was planting a bomb under the dining table. We sat down to eat. Leo made easy small talk. We ate. We talked about the weather, about Leo's new boat, about nothing important. As the meal wound down and Chloe started to clear plates, I felt my heart hammering against my ribs. This was it. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket, which was draped over the back of my chair. I pulled out the long, legal envelope. I held it in my hands for a moment, looking at my son's name typed neatly on the front. "James," I said. My voice was steady, quieter than the room. He looked up from his phone, which he'd just checked. "Yeah, Dad." I extended the envelope across the table. "This is for you." He frowned, a little smile playing on his lips, thinking it was a birthday card or something. His birthday was months away. He took it. "What's this?" "It's a 30-day notice to vacate the premises from the trust that now owns this house." The room did not go silent. It went dead. The air was sucked out of it. Chloe froze, a plate in each hand. Leo looked down at his lap. James's smile didn't fade so much as it cracked and fell off his face. He stared at the envelope like it was a live snake. "What?" The word was a flat, disbelieving exhale. "The deed to the house was transferred into a living trust 2 weeks ago," I said, repeating the lines I'd practiced. "The trust is terminating your month-to-month tenancy. You have 30 days to vacate. Any questions should go to the trust's attorney, Martin Griego. His number is on the notice." James ripped the envelope open. He pulled out the single-page notice, his eyes scanning it. His face flushed a deep, blotchy red. "A trust? What the hell is this, Dad? Is this a joke?" "No, James, it is not a joke." Chloe slammed the plates down on the table. "You're evicting us, your own son, your grandson." Her voice was a shriek. "I am giving you 30 days notice, as required by law," I said, still seated. "The trust is making a business decision regarding its asset." James stood up so fast his chair screeched backwards. He waved the paper. "This is insane. You can't do this. We live here. This is our home." "It is the trust's home," I said, the repetition of the word trust feeling like a shield. "And you have been served legal notice." The next 10 minutes were a blur of shouting. Chloe cried. James yelled, calling me a manipulative bastard, a coward for using a lawyer. He accused me of planning this for months, of lying to them. In a way, he was right. I had planned it, carefully, precisely. He finally spat out the question burning in his eyes. "Why?" "Because I changed the stupid Wi-Fi password." I looked at him, my son, his face twisted with a betrayal he truly felt. "The password was the last tolerance, James, not the first. You didn't change the password. You changed the locks. You just didn't have the key." He had no idea what I was talking about. He saw a series of small, reasonable adjustments. I saw the dismantling of my autonomy, piece by piece. We were looking at the same blueprint, but reading 2 different sets of measurements. He crumpled the notice in his fist. "We're not leaving. You can't make us. You'll have to drag us out." That's your choice, I said, finally standing up. But if you're not out in 30 days, the trust will file for a formal eviction with the court. That will go on your record. It will make it very hard for you to rent anywhere after that. The choice is yours. I looked at Leo, ready to go. Leo nodded, and we walked out of the dining room, leaving them in the wreckage of the dinner table. I went to my bedroom, closed the door, and listened. I heard more yelling, the slam of a door, the sound of a car starting and peeling out of the driveway. James's car. For the next 48 hours, I was a ghost in my own house again, but this time by design. They avoided me. I stayed in my room or left. The silence was thick and hostile. Then, on Tuesday evening, the first countermove arrived. It wasn't from James. It was from Chloe's father, Ron, a man I'd met twice. He called my cell phone. His voice was all forced, greasy reason. "Frank, Ron here. Listen, I'm hearing about some misunderstanding with the kids. I know James can be hard-headed, but kicking them out with a baby, in this economy, let's be men about this and talk. I'm sure we can work something out." I followed Martin's advice. "Ron, this matter is being handled by the trust's legal counsel. I'm not at liberty to discuss it. Have a good night." And I hung up. The next day, it was a text from Chloe's mother, a long, guilt-laden message about family sticking together, about how hurt Chloe was, how confusing this was for little Noah. I didn't respond. The day after that, my own sister Margie called. "Frank, James called me. He's devastated. What on earth is going on? A trust? Evicting your own boy? Have you lost your mind?" I gave her the same line about the trust's attorney. She called me a heartless fool and hung up. The pressure campaign had begun, just as Martin said it would. They were trying to bypass the legal wall and reach the soft heart of the father behind it. But the wall held. Every angry call, every pleading text, every relative deployed as an emotional missile was met with the same phrase: "Please direct all inquiries to the trust's attorney, Martin Griego." It was a mantra. It was my armor. A week after the dinner, I came home to find Martin Griego on my voicemail. His tone was no longer just calm, it was alert. "Frank, Martin, James and Chloe have retained an attorney, a guy named David Pell. He's contacted my office. They're not going quietly. Call me back." I sat on the edge of my bed, the phone in my hand. This was the escalation I'd feared but expected. They weren't just angry, they were lawyered up. The family civil war was now a legal battle. I called Martin back. "Pell is arguing two things," Martin explained. "First, that the trust transfer was a fraudulent conveyance meant solely to evade tenant protections, that it was done in bad faith. Second, and more dangerously, he's hinting at an elder financial abuse counterclaim. He's suggesting that you, as an older person, were unduly influenced by me to take this action, harming your family and your own financial future." The breath left my lungs. Elder abuse. For protecting my home, the inversion was breathtaking. The victim was being cast as the predator. "They're claiming," Martin continued, his voice crisp, "that the creation of the trust and the eviction notice constitute a form of financial self-harm that only a compromised person would undertake, and that therefore someone, likely James, needs to be appointed to protect your interests. It's a preemptive strike to gain control of the trust itself." The genius of the move, its viciousness, settled over me. They weren't just fighting the eviction. They were trying to have me declared incapable, to have my son named as my guardian or the trustee of my own trust, to take the house by proving I was too irrational to keep it. The Wi-Fi password wasn't the endgame. This was. "My advice," Martin said, "is we go on the offensive. We file the eviction proceeding in housing court immediately. We don't wait the 30 days. We show the court we are serious, and we force them to present their arguments before a judge sooner rather than later. It also allows us to subpoena their financial records. If they're claiming this is their only home, let's see how hard they've been looking for another one. Let's see where James's money has really been going." He paused. "It will get ugly, Frank. Once we file, it's a public record. Neighbors might see. Are you prepared for that?" I looked around the bedroom that was my last refuge. I thought of the toolbox in the corner, the relocated recliner, the smell of my own pot roast used as the backdrop for an ambush. The ugliness was already here. It was just hidden behind the wall of family. "Do it," I said, my voice hollow but firm. File it. 2 days later, a deputy sheriff served James with the formal summons and complaint for unlawful detainer, the official start of an eviction lawsuit. The war was no longer cold. It was hot, and it had a docket number. The reaction was volcanic. That night, James finally confronted me directly. He didn't shout. His voice was low, trembling with a cold fury I'd never heard from him. "You filed in court against us? My attorney says you're trying to have me declared your keeper. Is that true, Dad? Are you that far gone? Do you hate us that much?" I looked at my son, a stranger silhouetted in my hallway. "I don't hate you, James. I'm fighting for my home. Your attorney is trying to have me declared unfit so you can take it. So tell me, who started this?" He had no answer. He just shook his head, a look of pure disgust on his face, and walked away. The bridge between us wasn't burning. It was being methodically dismantled, plank by legal plank. A week later, the first legal bombshell landed. Martin called, and I could hear the tension in his usually unflappable voice. "We received their formal response to the complaint, Frank, and they've filed a separate petition in probate court. They're asking for a temporary guardianship over you and for the court to void the trust transfer, claiming incapacity and undue influence. They have a declaration from Chloe's father stating you seemed confused and easily led when you last spoke. They have one from your sister saying you've been acting erratically." He took a breath. "And they have a letter from a Dr. Alvin Skiff, a psychologist, who is prepared to testify that your actions are consistent with early cognitive decline exacerbated by social isolation. They've scheduled a competency evaluation for you in 2 weeks. The court ordered it." The room spun. A doctor, a court-ordered evaluation. They had constructed a reality, brick by brick, where I was a confused old man being manipulated by a lawyer, and they were the concerned family trying to save me from myself. It was a fortress of lies, and a judge had just given them the keys to start building it. I was no longer just fighting for my house. I was fighting to prove I was sane. I was fighting for the right to be the author of my own life. The ground had shifted beneath my feet, and I was falling into a chasm I never saw coming. Martin's next words came through as if from the end of a tunnel. "Frank, listen to me. We need to win the eviction case before the probate court hearing. If we can get a judge to rule that they are simply tenants refusing to leave, it undermines their entire concerned family narrative. But to do that, we need something. We need leverage. We need to show the housing court judge that their claim of hardship is a sham. We need to find out what James and Chloe have really been doing with their money for the last 6 months. Because if they weren't planning to leave, what were they planning?" He paused, letting the question hang. "I have a private investigator I work with. She's very discreet, very good. It's time we used her. We need to see what's on the other side of that door they've been keeping closed. Are you willing?" I thought of the look on James's face when he changed the Wi-Fi password. The certainty, the ownership. What else did he feel certain he owned? I felt a cold resolve solidify in my chest, pushing out the fear. "Do it," I said. "Find out." The private investigator's name was Anna. She called 3 days later, and her first question had nothing to do with bank statements. "Frank, does your son have a storage unit?" I thought about it, not that I know of. Why? Because a U-Haul facility on Route 9 has a 10 by 15 unit rented to a James Ellis for the past 4 months. That's around $200 a month. I'm looking at the billing. Her voice was neutral, factual. Why would someone living rent-free in a large house need a $200 a month storage unit? A cold puzzle piece clicked into place. The cleared-out garage, my workshop contents in a single box. They moved my things out, my tools, my projects. They said it was to make space. "They moved them into a paid storage unit," Anna corrected. "They are paying to store your belongings while living for free in your home. That is a deliberate, ongoing financial choice." She had more. A search of public records showed that James had not been laid off from his tech sales job 6 months ago, as he told me. He had resigned, voluntarily. His LinkedIn profile, updated the week after he moved in, listed him as a consultant and exploring new ventures. Anna had pulled credit reports with the legal authorization Martin provided. James and Chloe had run up nearly $18,000 in credit card debt in the past 5 months. The charges weren't for diapers or groceries. They were for restaurant meals, weekend hotel stays, new electronics, and furniture. My furniture, apparently, wasn't good enough. The narrative of a family in financial distress, scrambling for shelter, doesn't hold, Anna said. This is the pattern of people who have stopped their forward momentum. The free housing wasn't a bridge, it was a destination. The money that would have gone to rent is going to lifestyle and debt service. Then she delivered the second piece. There's also a series of searches on the public computer at the local library tied to Chloe's library card. The search history shows repeated queries over the past 2 months. Tenant rights after 30 days. Adverse possession requirements our state. Can family members contest a living trust? Grounds for elder financial abuse claims. They weren't just living there, they were studying. They were building their case, weaponizing the law while portraying themselves as victims. The competency claim wasn't a desperate Hail Mary, it was a researched legal strategy. I thanked Anna and called Martin immediately. We have it, I told him, my voice tight. The storage unit, the resignation, the debt, the search history, they weren't trapped, they were camped. Martin was quiet for a moment. This is excellent, this is exactly what we need. It destroys their credibility in both courts, but Frank, it also shows something else. This is calculated. They are not naive kids in over their heads. They are engaged in a deliberate financial project, and you are the asset. We need to move fast. The competency evaluation is in 10 days. We need to win the eviction case before that. The eviction hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday. Martin prepared a devastating package: the storage unit lease, proof of James's voluntary resignation, the credit card summaries, the library search history. His argument was simple. These were not vulnerable tenants facing homelessness. They were financially capable individuals choosing to exploit a family member's generosity while planning a legal takeover of his home. The trust's decision to evict was not only legal, it was necessary to protect its asset from bad faith occupants. The night before the hearing, James approached me. He looked exhausted, the cold fury replaced by a hollowed-out anxiety. Dad, can we talk? Without the lawyers, please. We stood in the hallway, the same place where he'd confronted me weeks before. They're going to destroy us in court tomorrow, he said, not looking at me. The storage unit, it was just for your stuff. We were going to give it all back. You were paying $200 a month to keep it, I said, while you told me you couldn't afford to contribute here. He flinched. The job, it was a toxic environment. I had to leave. I was going to find something else, but then things got comfortable. Comfortable, I repeated. The word hung in the air. Dad, if we lose tomorrow, we'll have an eviction on our record. We'll never rent a decent place. Chloe's parents can't take us. We have nowhere to go. His voice broke. It was the first real, uncalculated emotion I'd heard from him in months. It was fear. I felt that old, deep pull, the father's instinct to fix, to shelter. But I also saw the library search history in my mind, the queries about adverse possession. You had a plan, James. This wasn't an accident. You looked up how to take my house from me. His head snapped up, his eyes wide with genuine shock. What? No, that was... Chloe was just scared. She was looking things up. That doesn't mean we were going to do it. In a court of law, James, it means intent. It means you saw a path and you started walking it. I felt a profound sadness, heavier than anger. The hearing is tomorrow. Your attorney will make his case. Martin will make ours. The judge will decide. He stared at me, and I saw the final understanding dawn in his eyes. The shield of family was gone. We were two opposing parties in a civil lawsuit. He nodded once, a stiff, mechanical motion, and walked away. The housing court was in a bland, modern county building. It felt nothing like the grand courthouse of my imagination. It felt like the DMV, but with higher stakes. Martin and I sat at one table. James, Chloe, and their attorney, David Pell, sat at another. Pell was a young guy in a slightly too tight suit, radiating a slick, aggressive energy. The judge was a weary-looking man in his 60s named Judge Morrison. He listened to Pell first, who painted a picture of a loving son, a young family, fallen on hard times, offering nominal rent, only to be blindsided by a father who'd been manipulated by a lawyer into a cruel and unnecessary legal maneuver. He called the trust a sham conveyance. He talked about the trauma to little Noah. Then it was Martin's turn. He was calm, methodical. He entered the evidence into the record. He walked the judge through the timeline, the voluntary resignation, the storage unit for the homeowner's possessions, the $18,000 in lifestyle debt accrued while paying no rent. He saved the library search history for last. Your Honor, this is not a case about a family dispute. It is a case about exploitation. The respondents are not destitute. They made a series of financial choices to redirect their resources away from housing and into personal consumption, while simultaneously researching legal strategies to seize the very property they were living in for free. The petitioner, through his trust, is not being cruel. He is stopping a financial takeover. The trust is simply asking for its property back. Judge Morrison asked a few questions, mostly about the validity of the trust transfer. Martin cited the statute. It was perfectly legal. The judge then looked at James. Mr. Ellis, is it true you voluntarily left your employment? James, under oath, stammered, It was a constructive dismissal. The environment was hostile. But you resigned. You were not terminated. Yes. And the storage unit. You were paying to store your father's belongings. It was for his safety. The tools were dangerous for my son. Yet you continued to pay for it month after month, while not paying rent. Wouldn't the safer, more financially sensible choice have been to sell or donate the tools if they were a hazard, and use that $200 toward actual housing? James had no answer. He looked at Pell, who just shook his head slightly. Judge Morrison didn't take long. He ruled from the bench. The evidence is clear. A month-to-month tenancy existed. Proper 30-day notice was given. The notice is valid. The claim of a fraudulent conveyance is not supported. The request for eviction is granted. The respondents have 10 days to vacate the premises. Failure to do so will result in a writ of possession being issued to the sheriff. 10 days, not 30. We had won decisively. The look on James's face was one of utter devastation. Chloe was crying silent tears. Pell was already packing his briefcase, avoiding their eyes. As we walked out, Martin gripped my shoulder. This is huge, Frank. This undercuts their whole probate court petition. A housing court judge just found them to be exploitative tenants, not concerned caregivers. We need to get this transcript to the probate judge immediately. For a moment, I felt a surge of relief. Then, as we stepped into the hallway, I saw them. James was leaning against the wall, his face in his hands. Chloe was speaking to him in a low, furious whisper. She saw me, and her expression shifted from anger to something pure and venomous. She walked right up to me, ignoring Martin. You think you won? She hissed, her voice low so the bailiff wouldn't hear. You just lost your son, you hear me? He will never forgive you for this. You chose a house over your own family. You're a hollow, lonely old man, and you're going to die alone in that big, empty house. And we will be there with Noah to make sure it goes to who it should go to. Before I could respond, she turned and stalked away, pulling a stunned James behind her. Her words landed like physical blows. Die alone, the ultimate fear weaponized. The victory in court suddenly tasted like ash. I had my house back legally, but the cost was now quantified in the shattered face of my son and the curse of his wife. Martin, seeing my expression, steered me toward the exit. Don't listen to that, Frank. That's the sound of the leverage slipping out of their hands. They have one play left, the competency evaluation. We need to get you ready for that. The evaluation was with Dr. Alvin Skiff in 5 days. Martin had a psychologist of his own, a forensic expert named Dr. Lynn Powell, who would prep me. They're going to try to trip you up, Frank. They'll ask about dates, about your finances, about why you made the trust. They'll try to provoke you to see if you get confused or angry. You need to be calm, factual, and consistent. You are a retired machinist who made a prudent estate plan. That's the story. For the next 4 days, I drilled with Dr. Powell. She taught me techniques to stay calm, to pause before answering, to not be baited. You are not there to prove you're a genius, Frank. You are there to prove you are of sound mind, that you understand the nature and consequences of your actions. That's all. The night before the evaluation, I couldn't sleep. I wandered the empty, half-repossessed house. Their belongings were still in the other rooms, a ghostly presence. In 10 days, the sheriff could remove them, but Chloe's words echoed, die alone. Was this what winning felt like? The door to what had been Noah's room was ajar. I pushed it open. The crib was there. A mobile of stars hung silently. On the dresser was a framed photo of James, Chloe, and Noah at the beach, smiling. A happy family. A family that from the outside had everything. A family that on the inside had been planning a quiet coup against the old man down the hall. I picked up the photo. I looked at my son's smile. Was any of it real? The love, the respect, the gratitude? Or was it all just a performance, a cover for the financial project of taking over Frank's asset? I didn't know anymore. The foundation of trust wasn't just cracked, it was pulverized. I set the photo down. The fight for the house was almost over, but the fight for my family, for any future that didn't end in that cursed phrase, *alone*, that fight was just beginning. And it would all hinge on the next morning in a psychologist's office where I would have to prove, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that I was still the master of my own mind. The final battle wouldn't be in a courtroom, it would be inside my own head. Dr. Alvin Skiff's office smelled like lemons and old paper. He was a thin man with kind eyes that didn't match the legal declaration he'd signed. He greeted me warmly, offered coffee, and began with casual questions. The weather, my drive over, my career as a machinist. He was feeling me out, looking for disorientation. Then the questions deepened. He asked me to explain why I created the trust. I used the words Martin and Dr. Powell had given me: estate planning, avoiding probate, ensuring clear succession of my asset. He asked if I felt pressured by my attorney. I said no, that I had sought him out for his expertise. He asked me to recall specific dates from the past year, the month my son moved in, the date of the eviction hearing. I got them right. He gave me a series of cognitive tests, remembering a list of words, drawing a clock face and setting the hands to a specific time, doing simple arithmetic backwards. My mind, honed by decades of reading blueprints and calculating tolerances, engaged like a well-oiled machine. I could feel the focus, the clarity. This was just another precision task. The hardest part came near the end. Dr. Skiff leaned back, steepling his fingers. Frank, your son and daughter-in-law believe you are acting out of character, that this legal aggression is a sign of underlying fear or perhaps cognitive change. How do you respond to that? I paused as Dr. Powell had advised. I chose my words carefully. I am acting in character. For 38 years, my job was to assess stress points and prevent structural failure. I am doing that now for my own life. The method is legal instead of mechanical, but the principle is the same. I don't believe that protecting what you've built is a sign of decline. I believe it's a sign of function. He nodded, wrote something down, and that was it. The evaluation lasted 2 hours. As I left, I had no sense of whether I'd passed or failed. I had just been myself, and for the first time in months, that self felt sharp and unequivocal. The probate court hearing was a week later. It was a different kind of room than housing court, older, wood-paneled, quieter. Judge Irene Walsh presided. She had a reputation for being thorough and unsentimental. David Pell, James and Chloe's attorney, went first. He presented their petition, framing me as a one-scapable man now isolated and manipulated, making rash decisions that harmed his family and his own future welfare. He cited the sudden creation of the trust, the unnecessary eviction. He called Dr. Skiff to testify. Dr. Skiff took the stand. Pell led him through his declaration about early cognitive decline. Then Martin rose for cross-examination. He didn't attack. He just asked simple questions. Dr. Skiff, you performed a full neuropsychological evaluation on Mr. Ellis last week, correct? Yes, sir. Are the results of that evaluation consistent with the concerns you voiced in your initial declaration? Dr. Skiff hesitated. The evaluation showed no signs of dementia or major neurocognitive disorder. His cognitive functions are within normal limits for his age and education level. Did he display confusion about the nature or consequences of creating a trust? No. Did he display confusion about his relationship with his son or the reasons for the eviction proceeding? No, he articulated clear, logical reasons for both, based on his perception of events. So to be clear, Martin said, his voice calm, your updated professional opinion, based on a full evaluation, is that Frank Ellis possesses testamentary and contractual capacity. Dr. Skiff glanced at Pell, then at the judge. Yes, he does. You could have heard a pin drop. Pell looked like he'd been slapped. Their star witness had just undone their entire case. Martin then entered the housing court transcript into evidence. He highlighted Judge Morrison's finding that James and Chloe were exploitative tenants acting in bad faith. Your Honor, this is not a case of an elder being manipulated. This is a case of an elder being targeted. The petitioners here sought to use this court to complete the financial takeover that the housing court stopped. They attempted to weaponize your concern for vulnerable seniors against the very person they were trying to make vulnerable. Judge Walsh asked a few questions. She asked James directly if he thought his father was incompetent. James, under oath, mumbled, "I thought he was being influenced," but couldn't meet her gaze when she asked by whom, if not by his own attorney who was following his instructions. The ruling came quickly. Judge Walsh denied the petition for guardianship. She vacated the temporary order. She found that the petitioners had failed to meet their burden of proof, and furthermore, that the evidence suggested the petition was brought in bad faith as a litigation tactic in the separate property dispute. She warned David Pell about the ethical implications of filing such serious claims without a stronger foundational basis. It was over. They had thrown their last, most dangerous weapon, and it had blown up in their faces. The 10-day move-out period came and went. They did not leave. On the 11th day, Martin obtained the writ of possession from the sheriff's office. A deputy and a moving crew were scheduled for 2 days later. The night before the sheriff's arrival, James finally packed. I heard the sounds through the house, boxes being taped, drawers emptying. I stayed in my room. Around 10 p.m., there was a soft knock on my door. It was James. He looked older, deflated. "Can I come in?" I nodded. He stood awkwardly just inside the door. "We'll be gone by morning. The sheriff doesn't need to come. We got an apartment in the complex over on Mill Road." "That's good," I said. It was all I could manage. "I'm sorry, Dad." The words were so quiet I almost didn't hear them. For the password thing, for all of it, it wasn't. We didn't see it how you saw it." "How did you see it?" I asked, not accusingly, just wanting to know. He struggled for words. "As making things more efficient, modernizing, taking over stuff so you didn't have to worry. I thought I was helping." Chloe thought. She thought we were eventually going to inherit the house anyway, so why not start making it ours? She said it was just practical. He shook his head. It felt like helping until it didn't. There it was, the core of it. They had seen my life as a placeholder for theirs, my home as a legacy in waiting to be optimized and taken over. The love was there, but it was entangled with a sense of entitlement so profound they didn't even recognize it as a separate thing. "I love you, James," I said. "That never changed. But this is my home, not your inheritance. My home. While I'm alive, I need to live in it, not just occupy it while waiting for you to take over." He nodded, tears in his eyes. "I know that now. I'm sorry it took a war to learn it." They left at 6. The moving truck they'd rented was already half full. Chloe didn't look at me as she carried Noah to their car. James shook my hand, a stiff, formal gesture that broke my heart. Then they drove away. The silence that settled over the house was immense. It wasn't peaceful. It was haunted, full of echoes of yelling, of a toddler's laughter, of slamming doors. I walked from room to room. Their spaces were empty but marked. Scuff marks on the wall from furniture. A forgotten sippy cup under the couch in the living room. I left it all. I didn't clean. I just existed in the quiet. A week later, I went to the U-Haul facility and reclaimed my toolbox and my projects from the storage unit. I brought them home and put them back in the garage, slowly, deliberately. Each tool returned to its peg felt like a reclamation. The seasons turned. James and I did not speak for 3 months. Then one Saturday in October he called. His voice was tentative. "Hey Dad, I'm at the hardware store. I'm trying to put up a shelf in the new apartment and I can't find a stud. You got any tricks?" It was an olive branch, a request for the old knowledge, the father-son currency that had existed before the war. I talked him through it. We talked for 20 minutes about anchors and levels, We did not mention the house, the trust, or Chloe. After that, we started talking every few weeks. Surface stuff, work, the weather, how Noah was doing. It was strained, but it was connection. Chloe was not part of these calls, I understood. Then in December, James asked if he could stop by. Alone. He came on a Sunday afternoon, just like the old days. He looked better, less haunted. We sat in the living room, in my reclaimed recliner and the new grey sectional he'd bought, which I'd kept. "I have to tell you something," he said. "Chloe and I are separating." I wasn't surprised, but the confirmation was sad. "I'm sorry, son. It's for the best. We can't come back from everything that happened. There's too much resentment on her side. She still thinks you're a monster. I can't see you that way anymore. I see what I did." He took a deep breath. "I'm going to have Noah on weekends. I was hoping, maybe sometimes we could come here, if that's okay." My throat tightened. "This is your home too, James. Always. You and Noah are always welcome here." He nodded, relief washing over his face. That was the beginning of the slow, careful rebuild. The surprising detail came the following spring. I was cleaning out the filing cabinet in my office, finally sorting through the last of the legal papers from the ordeal. Behind the folder labeled Griego Trust was a small, folded piece of notebook paper I didn't recognize. I opened it. It was a floor plan, a rough, hand-drawn sketch of my house, but it was different. Walls were erased. My bedroom was labeled Master Suite. My office and the adjacent bedroom were merged into a single large room labeled Noah's Suite and Playroom. The garage was expanded. My workshop area was gone. At the top, in Chloe's distinctive looping handwriting, it said, "Future Renovation Phase 1." It was dated 2 months before they moved in. I sat down, the paper in my hand. This wasn't a plan made in the midst of living there. This was a plan drawn up in anticipation. They hadn't just moved in temporarily. They had moved in with a blueprint for my house's future, their future. The Wi-Fi password, the furniture, the cleared workshop, it was all phase 1. The competency claim, the probate case, that would have been phase 2, clearing the legal title. I had stopped the renovation before they could even knock down the first wall. I felt a chill, but also a final, solid certainty. My instincts had been right. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a project, and I had been the obstacle to be removed. I didn't show the drawing to James. I didn't need to. Some truths are too corrosive. I folded it back up, put it in the folder, and filed it away. It was evidence, but the trial was over. Now Noah comes over every other weekend. He calls me Grandpa. He plays in the backyard, and sometimes I let him make a mess in the garage with some safe scraps of wood. James is quieter, more thoughtful. We are building something new with clearer boundaries. It will never be what it was, but it is something honest. The house is mine again, fully, legally, peacefully. I changed the Wi-Fi password back to something I can remember. I sit in my recliner in the living room, and I watch the light move across the floorboards. I refinished myself 20 years ago. People ask me if I won. I tell them I didn't win a thing. I just didn't lose. There's a difference. Winning implies you gain something. I didn't gain anything I didn't already have. I just managed to hold on to it against a force that assumed it was already theirs. A machinist knows that the strongest joint isn't the one with the most weld. It's the one where the materials fit perfectly under the right pressure, each piece supporting the other without strain. What James and I had broke because the pressure was all in the wrong places. We're trying to fit the pieces back together now with more care. The new joint might not be as seamless as the old one, but if we do it right, it will hold. The foundation, my foundation, held because I maintained it. Even when the maintenance required a sledgehammer, the house is quiet. The trust is just a piece of paper in a filing cabinet, and I am here, drinking my coffee, master of my own domain, one tolerance at a time. So what is the moral of the story? Maybe there isn't one neat lesson. It's not simply don't let your kids move back in. For many families, that arrangement is a lifeline, a blessing. The problem wasn't the shared roof. It was the unshared assumption. The quiet, unspoken belief that my timeline was over and my assets were just early inheritances. We talk a lot about boundaries, but we rarely talk about how they are eroded. It's never a dramatic explosion. It's a quiet, relentless process of small concessions. A chair moved, a room repurposed, a password changed. Each one seems reasonable, explainable, you're being flexible, you're being a good grandparent, until you look up and realize you've negotiated yourself out of your own life. The law, in my case, was a tool, the trust was a shield, but the real battle wasn't in the courtroom. It was in the mind. It was overcoming the programmed instinct that saying no to your child is a failure of love. It was understanding that protecting what you built is not hoarding, it is stewardship. My story is one of millions playing out in different variations. With rising costs and changing family structures, more generations are sharing spaces. These arrangements can be beautiful, but they are also pressure cookers. They require explicit agreements, not just hope. They require respect for autonomy, not just blood relation. The most dangerous phrase in any family is "it's just temporary," when no one has a plan for what permanent looks like. I got my house back. I am rebuilding a relationship with my son, brick by careful brick. It's a different relationship, with clearer lines drawn in the soil. Some might call that a loss. I call it a renovation. You can't go back to the original blueprint after the walls have been stressed. You build anew with the knowledge of where the load-bearing points really are. For anyone watching this, feeling a similar quiet squeeze in their own home, my advice isn't legal. It's personal. Document the small things, notice the pattern, have the hard conversation early, and know that your peace, your autonomy, your home, they are not selfish things to protect. They are the foundation, and everyone at any age deserves to stand on solid ground. Thanks for listening to my story. If you know someone who needs to hear it, share it. And for more real stories about the quiet battles we all face, be sure to subscribe. I'm Frank. This has been my true story.